And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. On the international front, major Russian strikes in the Ukrainian capital overnight. Russia launching a major air attack early Thursday on Kyiv that included a rare strike on the city center, killing at least 21 people, wounding 48 others, and damaging European Union diplomatic offices. Fox News correspondent Alex Hogan with more.
Body bags line the rubble of blown-up buildings as rescue teams in Kyiv spend the day searching for survivors. Overnight, Russia carried out its largest aerial attack on Ukraine's capital in weeks.
It was a flash, and then everything started falling down. I don't understand how we're still alive.
Ukraine says Russia unleashed nearly 600 drones and decoys and more than 30 missiles across the country. Most hitting targets in Kyiv, sending civilians once again running to shelters.
All the people around you start to sit, cover their eyes, cover their ears. It creates total chaos, noise, and fear.
Officials in Kyiv say more than a dozen people are dead and about 50 are wounded. Attacks damaged roughly 100 buildings and shattered thousands of windows. The city's mayor argues this shows Russian President Vladimir Putin wants much more than the currently occupied territory.
He doesn't just want Donetsk, Luhansk, or Crimea. He wants the whole country. He is destroying cities and killing people.
European leaders condemn the strikes, which also hit the EU delegation's building. Despite the attacks, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov claims, quote, Russia remains interested in continuing the negotiation process. The Russian Defense Ministry says it shot down more than 100 Ukrainian drones overnight, and today the White House highlighted the attacks on both sides.
Russia launched this attack on Kyiv, and likewise, Ukraine recently dealt a blow to Russia's oil refineries. They have taken out, as a matter of fact, 20% of Russia's oil refinery capacity over the course of their attacks throughout the month of August.
Here in London, Britain's foreign minister summoned the Russian ambassador today, saying the killing must stop. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says his representatives are expected to meet with members of the Trump team tomorrow in New York. In London, Alex Hogan, Fox News.
Alex, thanks so much. I want to put this up, a post there on X from the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv. They say last night Russia's attacks in Kyiv again hit civilian targets, including Ukrainian homes and buildings housing the EU delegation and British consul. Strikes on civilian areas are unacceptable and must stop immediately. And we extend our deepest condolences to the victims and their families, saying when it comes to this war, President Trump has been clear. The killing must stop, and both sides must invest in a negotiated solution. All right, bringing into the conversation now, National Security Analyst and expert and retired Marine Intelligence Officer, Hal Kempfer. Hal, good to see you here. You and I have discussed this war since it began, now more than 3.5 years ago. This was, in a really long time, the most intense, the most damaging Russian assault in the heart, the city center of Kyiv. What's Russia trying to do? What message are they trying to send?
Well, you know, it's interesting, Andrew. On the one hand, when Putin talks to President Trump, they have these great conversations, and then as Melania has pointed out, then that night they launched a massive assault. This is one of the largest ones we've seen. 614 drones and missiles, 574 of them were drones, although many of them are decoys. That's a tactic the Russians have been employing more commonly. But you saw the damage. I just saw a recent estimate that it might be up to 23 deaths now, and tremendous damage. And it's not by coincidence that they hit the EU offices, not by coincidence that they hit the consul offices of Britain. So this is a part of their terror campaign. You know, it's interesting that Russia has this sort of strategy of warfare. They call it cognitive warfare, where they actually try to defeat their enemies in their minds before they defeat them on the battlefield. I mean, it's not a brand new concept. Soviet Union kind of had the same thing going back, but their idea is that they do stuff like this. If they can, you know, hit these icons, these symbols, hit the downtown of Kyiv, that somehow it'll break the will of the Ukrainians. And everything I've heard so far is, yes, the Ukrainians are battle weary. but they are by no means ready to throw in the towel. They are, their resolve is to get stronger with every one of these attacks.
I mean, it's just maddening watching all of this because Russia is talking out of both sides of its mouth. You saw that statement from Dmitry Peskov saying that they're still interested in resuming negotiations, whatever that means, and then they still, launch all of these ballistic missiles and drones on places like Kyiv. It's like, how do you hold those two things in your head at the same time?
Well, with Peskov, he can hold two diametrically opposite things in his head at any given time. I don't really think there's a lot up there that really stops those things from staying in different corners. So that's just the way Peskov tends to operate. But I will say this with Peskov. He said that after this drone strike, he basically was saying, hey, despite the fact we did this massive drone and missile strike and caused all this death and destruction, we're still open to talking to you. And basically, that's kind of what they've been getting from the Russians. That's certainly what President Trump has been expressing greater frustration. Where he says it doesn't appear, that Putin is really that interested. Putin thinks he's winning. Over the course of August, and it sounds impressive when you say it, they got over 200 square miles of territory. And that sounds impressive until you start looking at the amount of death or the losses that Russia incurred to make that rather modest gain. And Ukraine, yes, smaller than Russia, but still a pretty big place. And so if they keep that same rate of advance, I think the last estimate I saw, it would take 4 years for them to take the rest of Donetsk Oblast, the rest of that area, the Donbass, that Russia is trying to get somehow Ukraine to give up in negotiations.
Wow.
4 years at this pace. So that kind of gives you an idea of how slow the Russians are moving.
Yeah, the Associated Press has it that Ukraine's Air Force said Russia launched 598 strike drones and decoys and 31 missiles of different types across the country early Thursday, most of them striking these targets in Kyiv. So what about those talks, Hal? With Russia and Ukraine and the United States, where do they stand?
They're not moving very fast. We'll see. There's a meeting, of course, it was mentioned in New York tomorrow. I read that Zelenskyy might show up for that meeting, that he was intending on being there himself. This latest kind of makes me wonder if he is. It really isn't that easy for Zelenskyy to get in and out. I mean, I have to tell you, he spends a lot of time in the air and in a train getting in and out of Kyiv to get to the west, but he may show up tomorrow in that meeting. There are Ukrainian negotiators currently right now in Saudi Arabia, and they're waiting to see what they can eventually get there, and the Saudis are acting as interlocutors. But overall, this is not going where certainly President Trump hoped it was going to go.
Yeah.
There's no real hope right now. I don't think anybody's optimistic there's going to be a bilateral or trilateral meeting anytime soon. So that just seems to be kind of dead in the water, and the Russians have been throwing cold water on top of that dead in the water constantly. So it doesn't look like that's going to come about anytime soon.
Okay, yeah. I mean, tomorrow will mark 2 weeks since the Anchorage summit between Trump and Putin, and we always parse the language about what's the difference between a ceasefire proposal and a peace proposal? What is the difference, if anything?
Well, the ceasefire proposal, which is what the U.S., the Europeans, the Ukrainians were all behind, was just freeze the line, stop. Basically where they're at right now. The peace proposal, which is what President Trump started articulating after the Alaska meeting with Putin, was something the Russians wanted. They said, hey, let's do a larger peace agreement. Let's skip the ceasefire. Why? Because Russia doesn't want to stop where their lines are now.
Okay.
And so they start going for the larger peace agreement. But in that agreement, of course, Russia was saying, as they have all along, these maximalist goals, we want all of the Donetsk. And then, of course, they met with Witkoff, and he thought they were going to give up Zaporizhia and Kherson Oblast and trade that for the Donetsk thing. And frankly, since there was no State Department note taker there, which there normally is a State Department note taker there, we have no way of knowing exactly what they said in that meeting, except, of course, that they backed off right afterwards. They said, oh, no, that's not what we meant. We just meant that they could hold off recognizing our sovereignty over those two areas we control. So basically, Russia wasn't giving up much, which is another way of saying that whole peace thing doesn't seem to really have much traction right now.
I mean, there was so much momentum in those 3 days after the summit, and it seems to have fizzled. We'll see what comes of it. Hal Kempfer, thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Andrew.
All right. In the meantime here, we do have a video message posted on social media by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy after these strikes hitting the heart of Kyiv today. This is in Ukrainian with English subtitles. Let's listen.
Шановні українці, українки, весь день сьогодні на кількох локаціях в Києві тривали рятувальні роботи, розбирали завали після російського удару. Це був один із найбільших ударів. Було майже 600 дронів, 31 ракета, в тому числі балістичні. Станом на цей час відомо про 19 загиблих в Києві, з них 4 дитини. Мої співчуття всім рідним та близьким. Цей удар абсолютно чітко демонструє, що російські цілі дійсно не змінилися. Вони хочуть воювати, б'ють не тільки по наших людях, не тільки по наших містах, наших громадах. Росія зараз завдає ударів по всім у світі, хто прагне миру. Це удар по Україні, це удар по Європі. Також це удар Росії по президенту Трампу, по інших глобальних суб'єктах. У Вашингтоні ми чули, що Путін начебто готовий до закінчення війни, до зустрічі на рівні лідерів та вирішення ключових питань. Але він обирає балістику замість будь-яких реальних кроків до миру. Він вбиває дітей, щоб не говорити про те, коли і як буде мир. Проблема в тому, що він не боїться ось так бити по тим лідерам, яким він щось обіцяє. Це не тільки президент Америки. Це так само стосується країн, які ще досі торгують з Путіним, такі як Китай чи Індія, інші країни Азії, Латинська Америка. Росія просто втягує їх в свої спільники такими ударами, такими вбивством людей. Сьогодні було багато принципових реакцій на це російське зло, співчуття нашим людям, нашій країні. Лідери Європи принципові в цьому, громадські лідери, політики в багатьох країнах. Я вдячний всім в Америці, хто відчув зараз, який нелюдський цей удар, яке прагнення війни стоїть за ним. Зараз, коли всі так намагаються війну завершити, Росія б'є по звичайних будинках, по звичайному місту, цілеспрямовано, групами дронів, продумано додає ракет. Так, щоб було більше вражень. Харків через те проходить, Суми, Херсон, Запоріжжя, наші міста, громади. Потрібна чітка відповідь світу на це зло. Немає дедлайнів, які Путін не зірвав. Немає таких дипломатичних можливостей, які б не були б зіпсовані через Росію. Потрібні сильні кроки, і я дякую всім, хто це розуміє. Потрібні санкції, потрібні тарифи на тих, хто спонсорує цю війну так чи інакше. Сьогодні я говорив з Урсулою фон дер Ляєн, зокрема, про новий санкційний пакет та про координацію нашої дипломатичної роботи. Я говорив з президентом Туреччини Ердоганом, зокрема, про те, що російський удар саме зараз, саме такий жорстокий, доводить, що Путін не поважає нічого із того, що обіцяв. Світ має примушувати його до виконання обіцянок, примушувати його до припинення війни. Говорив я також з генеральним секретарем Організації Об'єднаних Націй Гутеррішем в контексті його підготовки до зустрічі в форматі Шанхайської організації співробітництва. Це будуть зустрічі в Китаї. На жаль, Китай дозволяє Росії воювати. Саме так це виглядає. І хоч було багато заяв з Китаю, що не можна розширювати війну, треба припинити вогонь, але дійсно сильних кроків до цього немає. Треба переконувати глобальних суб'єктів, щоб вони діяли. Закінчення війни можливе. Можливе завдяки силі, не словам, завдяки силі тиску на того єдиного, хто продовжує удари, затягує будь-яке врегулювання. Росія щодня вбиває. Отже, щодня вони повинні відчувати біль через те, що роблять. Це можливо. Санкції світу, тарифи, підтримка для України, наша сильна армія, наша здатність захищати життя та відповідати сильно російській воєнній машині. Вічна пам'ять усім, кого вбила російська держава.